Buenas tardes. I'm Carlos Cuauhtémoc Ayala. I am the President and CEO of Growing Inland Achievement. And today I'm going to do a presentation on the state of Latino education in the Inland Empire for the summer of 2021. I'm now going to stop my video and share my screen. Bear with me. The state of Latino education in the Inland Empire 2021. I'm Carlos Ayala. Growing Inland Achievement is an organization that is focused on raising educational attainment. We take a collective impact approach. We think about the educational network and the way that we can work with the network to raise educational attainment for the whole region. We were founded by our board represented down below, and we continue to work forward to raise educational attainment collaboratively, arm in arm with all the educational network in the Inland Empire. Our vision is that the IE will have a well-educated workforce, we'll have a bustling, thriving community, and that we're able to generate prosperity for all using education. And the way that we move forward on this, the way that we do our work, is that we convene, right? So we bring people together and we form action-oriented teams that carry out the work. We provide learning for the region, we provide data, we research issues, we look for opportunities, and then we find ways to resource innovations and solutions in the areas that our action-oriented teams focus on. And we would love it for you to join some of our action network teams, is what we call them. You can reach out to us. We can get you hooked up with that. When we look at the big snapshot of the Inland Empire and educational attainment here, one of the things that you need to take away with you in this message is that about 70% of the region does not have a post-secondary degree, not an associate's degree, not a certificate, not a bachelor's degree or a master's or a PhD. And that actually is a very large number. Another thing to take away from this presentation today is that about a quarter of the people in the Inland Empire do not have have some college and no degree. So a lot of people are starting college, but they don't finish. Those are two really important indicators. Now you say, well, how does that compare to the rest of the nation? Well, if we look at the top 13 metropolitan statistical areas in the United States, we're ranked 13th. So we have about 4.6 million people in the Inland Empire. Of all of these areas, we have the lowest educational attainment. And so that begins to illustrate the imperative that we have working here in the IE to raise our educational attainment. In fact, if you look at the top 50 largest metropolitan statistical areas, what you would see is that San Bernardino remains with the lowest post-secondary education compared to the top 50. And here I threw in the names of some other areas just for your reference so that you can see other large areas in the United States and their post-secondary educational attainment, like Las Vegas, San Antonio, Oklahoma City. So the work we need to do here in the Inland Empire is very important, and our post-secondary educational attainment is low, and we need to attend to this. But the question remains, what happens when we look at our Latino students? We know that about 51% of the population in the Inland Empire is Latino, and the population in our educational systems is even much higher than that. So what does it look like when we look at the disaggregated data for Latino students in the region? So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to present to you some key areas, some key indicator spaces. I'm going to be able to get through I'm going to talk about kindergarten readiness. Are the students ready for school? Have they completed some sort of preschool? Look at third grade reading, a very big predictor of future success. Eighth grade mathematics, a big STEM educator, a STEM indicator. High school graduation, whether students are graduating, whether they're graduating college ready or not. Then I'm going to look at post-secondary completion, whether folks are completing or not their post-secondary work. And those are going to be the key components of this presentation today. These other two components we'll present to you once we are more, when we have greater data to show you in this space, probably next year. So here's kindergarten readiness. And so we asked the question, what percent of young neighbors in our region go to preschool? So we're looking at 3 to 5 year olds who attended preschool in 2016, and we compare that to our young neighbors in 2019. And you'll see that if we look at all of the 3 to 5 year olds in the Inland Empire in 2016, about 29% of them completed, were enrolled in some preschool. And if you compare that to 2019, you'll see that there is an increase in the number of students attending preschool. So this is good news. We're improving as we begin to move forward. You will all also notice that in 2016, that there is a difference between the Hispanic students and the white students. So you'll see a gap here between the Hispanics and white, and this represents an inequity, right? If all things were equal, we would expect these two numbers to be the same, but there's an equity gap in this space. So this is one of the things that we champion here at Growing Inland Achievement, is that we are very much focused on equity as we present data and we take actions. We focus on these sort of equity gaps. If you look between 2016 and 2019, you will see that the equity gap remains. All the numbers have gone up, and the number of Hispanic students has increased more than the white students increased. So we're beginning to work on the equity gap in preschool. So that is really good news for kindergarten readiness. When we look at third grade reading, we dive into a data set that is the state level data system, and we get information broken down by county. So blues represent San Bernardino, and oranges represent Riverside County. And if we look at third grade reading, whether they've met or exceeded the standard in 2015, which is the first year that this standard came out, we'll see that that our Hispanic students are performing lower than our white students in 2015, and very similar across counties. Very little differences between counties, but a big difference between the Latino population and the white population. If we look at 2019, well, we also see large increases, right? These numbers have gone up dramatically in all areas, and so this is really good news. But we also see that the equity gaps have also still remained. We do note that we've worked on the equity gap, so the Hispanic rate has actually increased faster than the white rate, and so this is a good indicator that whatever we're doing, we're able to close the equity gap, which is one of the things, as I said before, that we strive for. If we look at eighth grade mathematics, we see the same trends. Two counties, We see that the Latino students are performing below that of white students in 2015. We see increases from 2015 to 2019, but we still see these disparities, these inequities between the Latino population and the white population of our eighth grade students. If we look at the increases that we see that, in the case of Riverside County, there was a large increase in our white population, so the inequities increased. And in San Bernardino County, things remained about the same between 1 year and between 2015 and 2019. However, I do want to mention that the numbers have gone up. And so this is really good news. Now we need to focus on the equity component of this work. When we look at high school graduation, there are two indicators that are important to pay attention to. That is whether students are graduating with a diploma, high school graduation, and whether they've attained A through G. A through G are a series of courses that students take in high school that if they take them and pass them successfully, then they're eligible to go to a four-year university like the Cal State or the UC. All students can go to a community college, and for a lot of students, that's a really good way to go in. But it's important to look at both sets of data to see how students are doing in high school. And as you would expect, the number of students who are completing A through G is less than this number of students who get a high school diploma. And you'll see that there is an equity gap between the white students and the Hispanic students in getting A through G. And we also see it in high school graduation. We see this difference between the white students and the Latino students. And a question you may ask yourself, well, why is it that A through G is so low compared to high school graduation? And that is a whole other conversation that I'm not going to get into, but you can go through high school and not be ready for college. And this is something that many regions in the state of California are working on. Now let's look at what happened between 2016 and 2017 when we started collecting this information, and 2018 and 2019, which is the latest data that we have available for us. What we do see is that we see increases. So the high school graduation rate has gone up, getting into the 90s. And we see that the A through G rate has increased for students. But we also see that the inequities remain between white and Hispanic students. And in the case of A through G increases for white students went up more than that for Latino students. The increases for high school graduation were about the same. So we see a very consistent message about, increases from between the two indicator years, but we also see this inequity at play. When we look now at post-secondary completion, we jump to a different data set to talk about this. We look at our neighbors who are 25 years and older, and we look at their educational attainment. And we broke it down. Remember that pie chart at the beginning that I showed you? Well, here it's broken down by comparing Hispanic and white students. So let me kind of explain this, and let me then highlight a couple of the features. So this first series of columns is the students or our neighbors without a high school graduation diploma. And this is the ones with a GED and a high school. Here are the number of people with some college. Here are the ones who complete an associate's degree, and here are the ones that have a BA or better, master's degree or PhD. So those are the series of columns we have. And of course, Hispanics are represented by the blue column, and then white neighbors by the orange column. And what you'll see are some, I think, stunning results here, that 33% of adults over the age of 25 and older who classify themselves as Latinos, 33% do not have a high school diploma, while the people who classify themselves as white, only 7% do not have a high school diploma. This is a really big difference, and it's something that when I first discovered this, I was frankly shocked by just this large number here. And then when we look at the people who have a high school degree or a GED, we see the disparity between the two groups. A very, it's a small number, but it's still there. So about a third of the students, about a third, 26% of whites and about 30% of Latinos have reached the high school graduation or GED, and then they've stopped there. When we look at some college, we see that the number of white students, there's a larger number of students with some college, and the Latino is less, so we see that inequity gap. And when we look at whether completion, whether they have an AA or BA, we also see these equity gaps in place, right? So what we're hoping to see is that we would hope to see that there would be more of all students in this category, in these categories here, and less percentages in these categories here. And why is it that we have such a large number of folks who start college and actually don't finish? And we have this large number of adult Latinos in the Inland Empire without a high school degree. And I'm sure you have your hypotheses about why that is. And we're diving into trying to explain that a little bit better. And a future report will come out that we'll talk about that. We have data across for other areas, other ethnic groups as well, and there'll be other presentations like this to show you that work. But this is something that we are striving for. This is a slide out of another report that we have available on our website that looks at educational attainment in general for the region. Since we are in the middle, as we're ending the pandemic, it's important for us to take a quick look at what are some of the effects we've seen in terms of the pandemic for all students and for Latino students. One of the things that we discovered in the fall of 19 and then in the fall of 20 was that there was a large number of students who were in high school who had an F grade. Now, so, you can imagine, think in your mind, well, how many students would you expect to be in high school without an F grade, with an F grade? And if you look in the fall of 2019, here's the numbers, right? So about 14% of the students who classify themselves as Asian had an F degree. About 21% of white students had an F degree. You'll see that our Black students, our Latino students had these respective numbers, Pacific Islanders, this respective number. But when you look at the fall of 20, you'll see dramatic increases in the number of students with Fs. Of course, this was in the middle of COVID. We were trying to figure out how we were going to serve students, and this presented a very big challenge to our K-12 colleagues, and this was true. And these are dramatic. Look, if you look at the number of Hispanic students who had an F in fall of 19, compare that to the fall of 20, you'll see it almost doubled. And for some students, it more than doubled. And so it's, as data is released for the overall academic year, we will, we'll release that data in a report that will highlight this information. If we look at other student groups, especially our very needy groups, you'll see that some groups had really high um, F rate in fall of 19, and even the ones with very high rates actually had increases, and this is something that we really need to pay attention to. Why are seniors getting Fs? How does that work? What does that lay for the future? What can we do to ameliorate that in our space? Finally, I wanted to present about Dreamers and how Dreamers and DACA students are doing. Unfortunately, there's just not a good data system for collecting information about DACA students to present to you today. But there are several reports out there. One of them is listed down here that you can take a look at. And there's a lot of need in this space, and these are the 6 top needs that were identified across multiple reports, and so this is something that we need to pay attention to. What we do know is that there's about 250,000 young people who received DACA status in 2012, and we expect that number to be much higher, and so this is something that we need to explore more. We need to be able to get better data, and our data system in the state is going to be improved dramatically over the course of the next 3 years because of the work that Governor Newsom has done in preparing a new data system. But this is something that we need to keep in mind, and as we disaggregate our data, we need to look at Dreamers and DACA as a separate group, and we need to find ways to better represent them. So thank you for your time today. We anticipate having a state of Black education in the Inland Empire as well. So thank you all, and we'll be in touch.